The bloodiest 5 hours of fighting on the eastern Ukrainian front in recent weeks did not involve tanks, drones, or long-range missiles. It happened underground in the dark, in a network of trenches, tunnels, and bunkers that stretched for 6 kilometers across a section of terrain that Russian forces had spent months fortifying, reinforcing, and filling with soldiers who believed they were sitting inside an impenetrable fortress on stolen Ukrainian land. They were wrong. Just days ago, Ukrainian assault teams from one of the country's elite infantry brigades launched a coordinated nighttime attack on the Russian trench system, an operation planned over weeks, rehearsed in replica positions behind the front line, and executed with a level of discipline, aggression, and close-quarters combat skill that left the Russian defenders overwhelmed, disorganized, and ultimately destroyed. By the time the winter sun rose over the scarred fields of southeastern Ukraine, the entire 6-kilometer position was in Ukrainian hands. The Russian battalion that had occupied it, approximately 350 soldiers, had effectively ceased to exist as a fighting unit. This is what modern trench warfare looks like when one side has better soldiers, better training, and the will to fight in the most terrifying conditions combat can offer. The Russian position was formidable on paper. Intelligence gathered through weeks of drone surveillance, signals intercepts, and analysis by Ukrainian military planners painted a detailed picture of what the assault teams would face. The trench system ran roughly north to south along a low ridgeline, with the deepest positions located in the center where the terrain offered natural elevation. The Russians had dug communication trenches connecting forward fighting positions to rear bunkers, creating a web of interconnected passages that allowed soldiers to move between positions without exposing themselves to surface fire. At least 12 reinforced bunkers were identified along the system, some built with concrete and timber roofs, capable of withstanding direct hits from mortar rounds and small-caliber artillery. Machine gun nests were positioned at intervals covering the open ground to the west, the direction from which any Ukrainian attack would logically come. Anti-personnel mines had been laid in belts along the approaches. Tripwires connected to flares were strung across likely avenues of advance. The Russians had done everything their field manuals told them to do, but Ukrainian assault teams do not attack the way Russian field manuals expect. The operation was the culmination of 3 weeks of meticulous preparation. Ukrainian intelligence had mapped every meter of the trench system using a combination of aerial drone surveillance, ground-level observation from concealed forward positions, and intercepted Russian communications that revealed the locations of command bunkers, ammunition stores, and defensive strongpoints. Ukrainian assault teams had rehearsed the attack on a replica trench system constructed behind friendly lines, practicing room-clearing techniques, bunker assault procedures, and the precise choreography of multi-directional entry that would be required to overwhelm the defenders before they could organize a coherent response. Every Ukrainian soldier involved in the operation had been hand-selected. These were not conscripts. These were not recently mobilized men handed a rifle and pushed forward. These were professional infantry, soldiers with months or years of combat experience, trained in close-quarters battle techniques that combined speed, violence, and precision in equal measure. Many had participated in previous trench assaults and knew exactly what awaited them in the darkness below ground. The confined spaces where a single wrong step means death, where grenades bounce off walls and shrapnel fills the air, where the enemy is so close you can hear him breathing on the other side of a timber wall. The operation began at 0100 hours. There was no preliminary artillery barrage, no warning, no bombardment to announce that an attack was coming. This was a deliberate decision by the Ukrainian brigade commander, a veteran officer who understood that the key to storming a fortified trench system is not firepower but surprise. Artillery would have alerted the Russian defenders, driven them into their deepest bunkers, and given them time to prepare. Instead, the Ukrainian assault teams moved in silence. 5 separate assault groups, each consisting of 3 to 5 Ukrainian soldiers, had been pre-positioned in concealed locations as close as 150 meters from the Russian trench line during the previous night. They had crawled into position through frozen drainage ditches, across muddy fields, past the mine belts, using lanes that Ukrainian combat engineers had secretly cleared over the preceding 48 hours. For over 20 hours, these assault teams had lain motionless in their hide positions, enduring freezing temperatures, waiting for the signal. Stay with this. What happened when those 5 teams entered the trenches simultaneously from 5 different directions is one of the most intense ground combat engagements of this entire war. At 0100 hours exactly, all 5 assault groups moved. They crossed the remaining distance to the trench line in under 2 minutes, sprinting low across open ground in complete darkness, guided by night vision equipment that turned the black landscape into shades of glowing green. The Russian sentries on the nearest positions never saw them coming. The first Russian soldiers to die that night did not hear a gunshot. Ukrainian assault troops used suppressed weapons and combat knives to eliminate the forward sentries without alerting the positions behind them. Within the first 10 minutes, all 5 entry points were secured. 5 Ukrainian assault groups were now inside the Russian trench system, spread across a 6-kilometer front, each group moving inward, clearing as they went. And the Russian soldiers deeper inside the trenches still had no idea the attack had begun. The first bunker fell at 0112 hours. A 3-man Ukrainian team approached the entrance, a narrow doorway cut into the trench wall covered with a tarp. 1 Ukrainian soldier pulled the tarp aside while a second threw a fragmentation grenade through the opening. The explosion in the confined space was devastating. The team entered immediately after detonation, weapons up, clearing the bunker in under 8 seconds. 4 Russian soldiers inside, 2 dead from the grenade, 1 critically wounded, 1 surrendering with his hands raised. The Ukrainian team secured the prisoner, marked the bunker as cleared, and moved to the next position. This sequence repeated, with variations, dozens of times over the next 5 hours. Which aspect of trench assault combat is most decisive? A. Night vision superiority. B. Suppressed weapons and surprise. C. Training and small unit discipline. D. All of the above. Tell us in the comments. The fighting was not one-sided at every point. Russian soldiers in several positions fought back with desperate intensity. At one fortified bunker near the center of the system, a position that intelligence had identified as a company command post, Russian defenders were alert and organized. They had heard the grenade detonations from adjacent positions and had time to prepare. When the Ukrainian assault team approached, they were met with automatic weapons fire from inside the bunker and from a connected trench running to the east. The Ukrainian team leader, a sergeant with 2 years of combat experience, made an immediate tactical decision. Rather than assault into prepared fire, his team pulled back 15 meters and called for support from a second assault group operating in an adjacent trench. Within 4 minutes, the second team had maneuvered through a communication trench and approached the Russian position from the flank, a direction the defenders had not fortified because it connected to what they believed were their own positions. A coordinated attack from 2 directions overwhelmed the Russian defenders in under 30 seconds. 7 Russian soldiers were killed. 3 more surrendered. The fall of the company command post had cascading effects. The Russian captain commanding the company was among the dead. His radio equipment was destroyed. The soldiers in the positions that reported to him, scattered across a 2-kilometer section of the trench system, suddenly lost contact with their commander. They could hear fighting. They could hear explosions echoing through the trenches, but they could not reach their officer, could not receive orders, and could not determine the scope or direction of the attack. Some Russian soldiers attempted to organize local counterattacks. Small groups of 2 or 3 Russians moved through communication trenches toward the sounds of fighting, hoping to reinforce threatened positions. Ukrainian assault teams, moving methodically and maintaining communication with each other through encrypted radios, anticipated these movements. At several points, Ukrainian teams set up ambush positions inside the very trenches the Russians believed were still their own, waiting around corners, behind turns in the trench walls, in the shadows of bunker entrances. Russian soldiers walking toward what they thought were friendly positions walked instead into point-blank fire from Ukrainian fighters who had already cleared everything behind them. The psychological impact on the Russian defenders was immense. Intercepted radio fragments, panicked, broken transmissions captured by Ukrainian signals intelligence revealed the chaos inside the trench system. Russian soldiers screaming that they were being attacked from every direction. Platoon leaders begging for artillery support that never came, because the Russian artillery batteries behind the front could not fire into their own trench system without killing their own soldiers. Company-level officers who were already dead being called on radios that would never answer, and increasingly the sound of Russian soldiers abandoning their positions and fleeing east, out of the trench system, across open ground toward the Russian rear. Where Ukrainian sniper teams and drone operators were waiting, look at the sequence. Look at how each fallen position created confusion in the next. Look at how Ukrainian assault teams turned the Russians' own trench network, designed to protect them, into a labyrinth of death where every corner could hide an enemy, every bunker could be a trap, and every communication trench could lead to an ambush instead of safety. This is what happens when elite Ukrainian infantry meets Russian conscripts in close quarters. By 0400 hours, 3 hours into the assault, approximately 70% of the trench system was under Ukrainian control. The remaining Russian defenders had consolidated into two clusters, one at the northern end and one at the southern end of the system, each cut off from the other and from any external support. Ukrainian assault teams continued to press inward from both directions, methodically reducing each pocket of resistance. The northern pocket collapsed at 0500 hours. Approximately 40 Russian soldiers, cornered in a section of trenches with no escape route and no ammunition resupply, surrendered to the Ukrainian assault group that had surrounded them. They emerged from their bunkers with hands raised, exhausted, terrified, many of them wounded. Ukrainian soldiers secured them, provided medical treatment to the wounded, and moved them to the rear. Even in the brutality of trench warfare, Ukrainian forces maintained discipline and adherence to the laws of armed conflict. The southern pocket held out until approximately 0600 hours. The Russian soldiers there, a mix of regular infantry and what intelligence later identified as recently mobilized replacements with minimal training, attempted a breakout to the east. Approximately 25 Russian soldiers left the trenches and ran across open ground toward a tree line 300 meters away. Ukrainian machine gunners in captured positions along the trench line engaged them. FPV drone operators, who had been orbiting above the battlefield throughout the night, providing aerial support and observation, swooped in on the fleeing Russian troops. Fewer than 10 of the 25 made it to the tree line. The rest fell in the open field, their bodies marking the last failed attempt to escape the Ukrainian assault. By sunrise, it was over. 6 kilometers of Russian trenches captured. The Ukrainian flag flew from the highest point of the ridge. Ukrainian combat engineers were already at work strengthening the positions, reversing the firing directions of captured machine gun nests, and laying mines on the eastern approaches to defend against the Russian counterattack that would inevitably come. Is Russia's reliance on static trench defense a sign of tactical bankruptcy, or is it the only option left for an army that cannot maneuver? Drop your thoughts in the comments. The Butcher's Bill was devastating for Russia. According to confirmed battlefield reports and post-engagement assessment by Ukrainian intelligence, Russian personnel losses, approximately 170 killed, 60 to 80 wounded, and 47 captured, out of an estimated 350 soldiers defending the position. Total casualties, approximately 270 to 300. An attrition rate exceeding 80%. 12 reinforced bunkers captured or destroyed, including 1 company command post and 2 platoon-level positions, with intact communications equipment and operational documents that provided Ukrainian intelligence with valuable information about Russian force dispositions in the broader sector. Captured equipment included 14 machine guns, over 60 assault rifles and personal weapons, 3 anti-tank guided missile launchers with unused missiles, over 20,000 rounds of ammunition of various calibers, 2 electronic warfare devices, medical supplies, and rations sufficient for approximately 2 weeks. This equipment was immediately redistributed to Ukrainian frontline units. How many Russian soldiers do you think surrendered during this assault? A. Under 20, B. 20-40, C. Over 40. The answer: 47 Russian soldiers surrendered. Drop your reaction below. Now the economics. Building a 6-kilometer trench system of this complexity represents a significant investment of time, labor, and materials. Russian combat engineers and infantry spent an estimated 2 to 3 months constructing the positions, digging trenches to proper depth, reinforcing bunker walls with timber and concrete, installing overhead cover, laying mine fields, establishing communications wiring, and stocking ammunition and supplies. The estimated cost of construction, approximately $3 to $5 million in materials, equipment, and labor. The personnel losses carry the heaviest economic weight. Training and equipping 350 Russian soldiers, even at the minimal standards that characterize most mobilized units, represents an investment of approximately $7 to $12 million. The experienced soldiers among them, the NCOs and junior officers who had survived previous rotations, who knew the trench system, who understood the local terrain, are irreplaceable in any meaningful time frame. Russia can send more bodies to the front. It cannot send experience. The captured equipment adds another dimension. 14 machine guns at approximately $5,000 to $8,000 each. Anti-tank missile systems at $50,000 to $70,000 per launcher. The ammunition alone, over 20,000 rounds, represents approximately $50,000 to $100,000 at wartime production costs. The electronic warfare devices, depending on type and capability, could be worth $200,000 to $1 million and provide Ukrainian technical intelligence teams with valuable insight into Russian electronic warfare capabilities and vulnerabilities. The operational documents captured at the company command post may prove more valuable than any physical equipment. Maps showing Russian defensive plans, unit rosters revealing force strength and composition, communications protocols, supply schedules. This intelligence allows Ukrainian planners to understand not just what this battalion was doing, but how the broader Russian formation operates, where its weaknesses lie, and where the next Ukrainian strike should fall. Total estimated Russian losses from this engagement. Trench system construction investment lost, $3 to $5 million. Personnel losses, killed, wounded, captured, $7 to $12 million. Weapons and equipment captured or destroyed, $1 to $3 million. Operational documents and intelligence compromised, incalculable strategic value. Position lost, 6 kilometers of fortified front line that must now be reconstituted. Estimated $5 to $8 million in operational cost to establish replacement positions. Total, $16 to $28 million. Ukrainian losses in the assault were, by comparison, remarkably light. Multiple sources indicate that the attacking force suffered fewer than 20 killed and approximately 30 wounded, a casualty rate far below what military doctrine considers acceptable for attacking fortified positions, where the attacker typically expects to suffer 3 to 1 losses against the defender. The Ukrainian ratio was nearly inverted. The attackers inflicted 10 to 1 casualties on the defenders. This speaks to the extraordinary quality of Ukrainian infantry training, the effectiveness of the surprise assault, and the fundamental superiority of motivated, well-led soldiers fighting for their homeland against demoralized occupiers. Cost of the Ukrainian operation, ammunition expended, equipment wear, medical treatment for wounded, replacement of damaged gear, is estimated at approximately $500,000 to $1 million. $1 million to capture $28 million in Russian assets and destroy an entire battalion. A cost-exchange ratio of 28 to 1, but even this ratio understates the true impact. The loss of 6 kilometers of fortified front line creates a gap in the Russian defensive network that affects not just the destroyed battalion's sector, but the adjacent units on both flanks. Those units, which relied on the trench system as an anchor point for their own defensive lines, must now reposition, extend their frontage to cover the gap, and operate with exposed flanks until a new defensive line can be established. This cascading disruption affects a section of the Russian front far wider than the 6 kilometers that changed hands. Furthermore, the psychological impact on Russian troops in neighboring sectors cannot be overstated. Word of the night assault spread rapidly through Russian communication channels, both official and unofficial. Soldiers in adjacent positions heard the fighting, monitored the panicked radio calls, and watched the survivors stagger back through their lines at dawn. The message was unmistakable. If a fortified position held by a full battalion can be overrun in 5 hours, no Russian trench is safe. That fear, the knowledge that Ukrainian assault teams can appear in the darkness at any moment, from any direction, degrades the fighting capacity of every Russian unit within range, even those that were not directly attacked. If facts like these shatter Russia's image of military strength, type truth in the comments. What is more important in modern infantry combat, technology or training? Tell us below. The Russian counterattack came 2 days later. A hastily assembled force of approximately 150 Russian soldiers, pulled from reserve positions and given minimal briefing, attempted to retake the trench system with a frontal assault across the same open ground that the original garrison had relied upon for protection. Ukrainian defenders, now occupying the same bunkers, the same machine gun nests, the same fortified positions that the Russians had built, repulsed the counterattack in under 40 minutes. Russian losses in the failed counterattack: an estimated 50 to 70 additional casualties. The trenches that Russia spent 3 months building and 350 soldiers defending are now part of Ukraine's defensive line. The machine guns that were supposed to cut down Ukrainian attackers are now pointed east, toward Russian positions. The bunkers that sheltered Russian officers now shelter Ukrainian fighters. Everything Russia invested in that position, every ruble, every hour of labor, every soldier's life, now serves Ukraine's defense. This is the fundamental reality of Russia's war in Ukraine. Russia builds, Ukraine takes; Russia defends, Ukraine storms; Russia digs in, Ukraine digs them out. The pattern has repeated across the entire front line, in sector after sector, and every time it repeats, Russia loses soldiers it cannot replace, equipment it cannot rebuild, and positions it cannot retake. The Ukrainian assault troops who fought through those trenches in the dark, men who crawled through mud, kicked in bunker doors, fought hand-to-hand in spaces so tight they could not extend their arms, represent something that no amount of Russian concrete and barbed wire can withstand. They are the sharp edge of a nation that refuses to surrender its land, its freedom, or its future to an invader. And every trench they capture, every bunker they clear, every position they take is a message to Moscow. You cannot hold what you have stolen. 3 questions before you go. First, if a single Ukrainian assault brigade can overrun 6 kilometers of fortified trenches in 5 hours, suffering minimal casualties while destroying an entire Russian battalion, how secure is any Russian defensive position on Ukrainian soil? Second, 47 Russian soldiers surrendered during this assault rather than continue fighting. As morale collapses across the Russian front, how many more Russian troops will choose surrender over death in a trench they were forced to defend? Third, the captured documents from this position are now being analyzed by Ukrainian intelligence. What do you think those documents will reveal? And how many more Russian positions will fall because of what is written in them? Think about that. Subscribe to Steel Command, share this video. The war in the trenches of eastern Ukraine is not a stalemate. It is a slow, methodical dismantling of Russia's occupation, one position at a time, one night at a time, one assault at a time. The world needs to see it.